Good morning. What's going on, everybody? No, good afternoon. Welcome to Dylan Talks Tone. Welcome to the Just Gonna Say It podcast on Tuesday afternoons at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. I hope everybody's having a great afternoon. For those of you that are not familiar, we talk about guitar stuff all the time on this channel. It's what we do. And we have a podcast on Tuesdays, and we upload it to all the other podcast platforms. So if you're not a video on YouTube person, you can do that. You can listen to that later. We'll see how we do today. I just had a pretty gnarly dental procedure done yesterday. Drilled a hole in my jaw, blah, 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 blah. So we'll see how we do today. It's not the pain as much as it is the antibiotics they put me on. Oh, I just feel like crap. So anyway, yeah. So we're going to talk today about guitar mods you probably don't need. And so here's what I want to do with this. I've got a list of stuff that I think isn't really that necessary, and we'll talk about why. I think that the guitar is designed pretty well. And I think most guitar designs are actually designed pretty well. And I don't think that the problems that a lot of these mods, quote unquote, solve are actually solving anything. I think they're just kind of band-aids. So not always, right? Not always, but sometimes they are. So we'll talk about those things. The other thing too is it kind of doesn't matter, right? Like we might not need them, but doing stuff to your guitars is fun. So, you might not need a particular mod, but who cares? Like, who cares if you don't need it? It's cool. So you do it anyway, right? So there you go. I wanted to mention that this is a ad-free podcast. We don't turn the ads on for the live part of this. We'll turn them on later for the replays. So you can, support the channel with super chats. And oh, look at that. Tony just did. Thank you so much, Tony, for saying, hey, brother, good to see you. Thank you, sir. Good to see you as well. And thank you for the super chat, keeping us ad-free around here. So yeah, we'll chat about a lot of these mods. So we'll go through your list as you come up with them. Put a bunch of question marks in front of them so I can see them, or use a super chat so I can see it, and we'll drop what we're doing and we'll use those. And we'll just chat about a few of these things. And I think it's kind of fun because, I think what happens is people get sucked into a forum, they get sucked into a Facebook group or whatever. And, you see this all the time. Like, I just ordered this guitar. What mods should I do? And I'm like, dude, you don't even have it yet. Like, how do you even know? Like, don't go by that, So we'll chat about. I think that we just kind of get sucked into that stuff. So we'll chat about that. But like I said, you might listen to this podcast and be like, I don't care. I think what I did to my guitar is cool. I mean, I do that all the time, right? Like I change pickups all the time. It's not always needed, but I like it because it's cool and it's what I do. So, there's no wrong answers here, except that sometimes a lot of folks get, like I said, sucked into solving problems, spending money that they don't need to spend if they're are really objective about what's going on. So, pretty cool. My button is way too far away from me today. Thank you so much, Dave. Thanks for ad-free, Dylan. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it a lot. All right, well, I'll tell you what. Let's go through your list. I think there's a few people talking in there. Let's see. And then tomorrow we got a video coming out that's going to be free things that you can do to your guitar to make your tone better. So that video is coming out tomorrow. Let's see. I'm trying to go through here and see. I never should have bought the string butler. Okay, so yeah, actually that was on my list. Let's talk about the string butler real quick. A lot of folks swear by that thing. But it's kind of a band-aid to a real resolution. People are convinced, I don't know why, but people are convinced that you have to have this super straight string pull over the nut. It's just not true. You just don't need it. Now, Can a nut be incorrectly cut so that you do have these weird angles? Absolutely. And a Gibson nut can be cut incorrectly so that it, any nut can be really, but so that the angles are kind of compound as they go through there. If the nut is cut properly, you won't have tuning stabilities. This whole thing about no Gibson stays in tune on the G string isn't true. If you set it up properly, it will. It's just a matter of getting it right and taking the time to do it. And it just means taking the time and having a good tech to do it. So the string butler thing is sort of a band-aid, and it's dumb, honestly. And I understand there's a lot of people who are in a position who are like, you know what? It's easier for me to just bolt this thing on, and it does, quote unquote, solve the problem. It band-aids the problem, and it does make it to where it doesn't do the thing anymore that you're trying to fix. However, it isn't the actual solution to the problem. So if you want to get one, get one. I understand why people get them, but if you really want your guitar right, get a good tech to set your Les Paul up properly, or your Gibson, or any other guitar that has that funky angle. Straight string pull over the nut it's just not it's one of those things that people see it, they think it needs to be different, therefore it is, and then enough people talk about it and it turns into a thing, and it's just not really that true. Let's see, if my guitar is a Harley Benton, it could use a few mods. That is also true. Yeah, some guitars do come with an amount of problems where you're actually literally trying to solve problems to make them playable. But honestly, that's why I kind of avoid those guitars, because I don't want to mod stuff. I don't want to have a guitar that I have to fix a bunch of problems. You know what I mean? Is there a flamethrower mod? Absolutely. That's what we need. Yeah, doesn't the guys from Rammstein have flamethrower mods on their guitars? So it can be done. I do know it can be done. Just FYI, the super chat horn is way louder. Okay, hang on. All right, there, I fixed it. Thank you so much, sir, for saying so. Have you modded pickups in your AV2 Tele? I have an AV2 Strat coming tomorrow, and I bought it for the sound and vibe, but I also have a set of your John Cruz 57 pickups, so they might not sound as good as I think. Rusty, so pickups are a funny thing. I never view pickups as better or worse on an expensive guitar. So, those AVR2 guitars are really good. I have a Tele. It's fantastic. It's really good. It has it has the stock pickups in it now. I had my pickups in it for a while. I have different reasons for putting stock pickups back in it than you do. I like to have the reference there for when I'm doing stuff. You know what I mean? So I like to have a stock guitar to compare to. I like those 57s really, really, really a lot. They're my favorite pickup ever. That being said, you may put them in and decide that you like a different flavor. I look at pickups like flavors. I look at them like, a true connoisseur of anything does not have just one, right? That usually when you collect a thing, when you are really enjoying the hobby, no matter what it is, you have more than one, because you want this flavor, you want this flavor, you want this variant, you know what I mean, of whatever. And that's the way I look at pickups. I don't view them as, making anything better, except when you start to get like Fender Mexico and below, sometimes they can really need some help. The pickups that are in my what is that thing? My Mike McCready Strat. Those things are great. I haven't changed those out. So it's a case by case thing, right? If you don't like them, or if you want a different flavor, replace them. Now, if it's a very inexpensive guitar, and you are a particular person, obviously you're going to be like, I don't like these, and I know that Dylan pickups do a thing that this doesn't do. I'm going to swap them out. So, that's one of those things. Got a super chat. There we go. Ad free, worth the extra dollars. I hate ads. Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate your super chat. So yeah, I think, pickups are a super relative thing. A good setup solves a lot of problems without modding. It does. That's exactly right. I always wanted a fat finger when I was a teenager. That was actually on my list too. Anything sustain, and if you guys can think of any other ones, anything sustain enhancing to me is dumb. If the original designer of the guitar designed the guitar and said, this is what I intend, and it works, then I don't understand why you would spend money on, like, I get people asking me all the time, what do you think of Callahan Telecaster bridges? What do you think of this other Telecaster bridge that weighs 17 pounds, and when you clink on it, it sounds, you tap test it, it sounds a certain way. I'm like, I will never put that crap on my guitar. I won't. Because people say, well, it makes a huge difference and I can hear it. And okay, that's fine. And if you want to put bougie parts on your guitar, absolutely. I mean, I like bougie stuff. I really do. So I'm not talking that down at all. Like, I'm got a Chris Reeves in my hand right here. I like bougie stuff. So if you want to put bougie stuff on your guitar, totally do it. I 100%, or bougie pickups, obviously. I totally support that. But just know that if you're doing it in a problem-solving situation, a lot of that sustained stuff is just a Band-Aid to another problem. And really what it is, like was mentioned earlier, a good setup. Mechanical energy on a guitar is the most important thing. That and pickups. Getting mechanical efficiency on the guitar to be proper, not losing any energy through other extraneous vibrations and buzzes and that sort of stuff. Number one. And number two, making sure that I got good pickups that have a wide enough frequency response that do what you want it to do. Those two things, and you'll have everything you ever want, and you will not have to buy gimmicky bridges and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I just like the bling factor of the string butler, fully knowing it does nothing. Hey, see, now you're speaking my language, because I would do that. I would, just to troll people, put something on the guitar and be like, well, this is what it does. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. I like that. That's funny. I would do that too. I would do that too. Absolutely. Harley Bentons need mods, ? Yeah, that's pretty funny. Is bridge and tailpiece a worthy mod? So, personally, let's take, for example, a bridge and tailpiece on a Les Paul. On an American one, no. The hardware that they use is great. On reproduction ones, on copies, the reason I would change hardware on any copy guitar of any kind is because of quality of hardware. We're going to talk about this a little bit tomorrow in the video, but anytime you have cheap screws, cheap hardware, it makes life difficult. When you have really, really cheap intonation adjustment screws, for example, that strip out easily, and you actually have to slack the strings off of the guitar, otherwise you can't adjust the intonation. Like, a lot of people say that, well, you have to slack the strings before you adjust the intonation, otherwise you're going to strip the screws out. Not with good screws. If the hardware is good, you don't have to worry about it. You can actually do it on the fly and it's fine. But with really cheap stuff, you do. If you get a Squier Telly and try to do a lot of that stuff, it's one-time use screws, man. They're as cool as those guitars are, the hardware sucks. And so, personally, I would do those things for the purpose of reliability and longevity. So if you have an Epiphone and, or a Squier or something, and you're like, man, these screws are kind of cheesy, and, I've adjusted intonation a couple of times in my last couple setups and they're getting a little wonky, then I would replace them for sure. But, if it's a tone thing, like oh, this pot metal, it doesn't have as much tone as this other really expensive bridge. You know that's a bunch of crap. And does that guitar justify spending a bunch of hardware money on it when you know that putting pickups on it's going to make way bigger difference? You know what I mean? So, or new pots, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, the electronics, get the guitar working right, and then you know the electronics is going to make a bigger difference. Than spending $200 on an aftermarket bridge and tailpiece setup, unless, like I said, you're having issues, because a guitar that doesn't work is a guitar that doesn't work. So if you can't adjust stuff and you've got stripped out parts and all that kind of stuff, obviously you got to fix that, right? Makes total sense. Makes total sense. Let's see. What do you think of Seymour Duncan triple shots? I don't like them because I think they're too complicated. Are lipstick case pickups any good? We used to make them, but they're super expensive to make, and nobody wanted to pay the money to buy them. So you don't want to adjust any brass post thumbnail ABR bridge with the strings at tension, vintage or new. Any brass post. Yeah, that's probably true. I'm just going to say it depends. Because some of the newer modern stuff has like little shoulders and stuff built in to do it. But you're right. Use caution. Definitely use caution. Okay. Ed, Mr. Berger here just brings up a comment. Let's talk about, hang on. I got to get a pen and I got to cross stuff off my list. Okay. So we talked about, fancy bridges. We'll probably talk more about those if you want. No big deal. Bring up whatever you want. We'll talk about it all. String butler, we talked about. Sustained gizmos, we talked about. The thing where I would not spend a bunch of money on the bridge thing, I guess, is, your thicker gauge steel, your heavier force sustain, all those, whatever those buzzwords are that they put on that stuff. Think long and hard before you spend that money. Now it's cool, excuse me. People put wire wheels on their car. So, because they're cool. People put stuff on stuff because it's cool. I mean, I've probably got, I've got some stuff over here. It's just cool because it's cool. It doesn't do anything. It's just neat. So if that's why you're doing it, do it. Obviously do it. But what I wanted to do was kind of separate that whole problem solving and thinking you're actually going to change a thing from doing it just because it's cool. You know what I mean? So yeah. Have you made matchbook pickups like you see on a cigar box guitar? We've done that stuff before. Volume knobs that go to 11. Absolutely. Absolutely. That would be amazing. That would be amazing. Okay, capacitors. That's also on the list. And, I don't want to skip over freeway switches. Let's talk about the switches first, then we'll get to capacitors. So, we get a lot of questions. In fact, after the modding video about strats yesterday, people were like, well, that wasn't actually a modding video because you didn't actually mod anything. It was pretty stock. The idea behind that video was to inspire people to know how easy it is to work on a strat and do mods to it. Changing wiring on a strat is as simple as finding the right schematic and making the changes, right? Now, that being said, how many of you actually has a guitar with a 10-way switch on it that you use all the switch positions? Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to the rest of us. How many of you actually do? That stuff is really cool. We get requests for it all the time. Hey, can you do this thing with the blender thing and the flippy uppy downy in phasey outy everything thing? And I'm like, no. Okay, I'm not going to do it. I'll send you a basic single hum strat with a coil split. I'll send you a single strat, and then you can look up a wiring diagram and change it however you want. And it's very easy. If you know how to solder, you can do it. But I'm not going to do it, because what happens is there is an expectation once you start adding wiring weirdness to a guitar. Coil taps are an excellent example of this. Not coil splits on a humbucker, but coil taps on single coils. Excellent example of this, where people will say, I want this. Do you make coil tap P90s? No, we don't. I mean, I'll make you one, but no, we don't. We don't make them. Here's why. The reason is because you think on paper that it's going to do a certain thing, and the reality is it doesn't. It's way more subtle than you think. And you're wanting two different guitars in the same guitar, and it just doesn't happen. There are some mods that are super fun, like a four-way switch on a telly is really cool. Turning the neck pickup on a Strat is really cool. You know, even the Blender's pretty neat. I don't use it, but people like it, right? There's some neat stuff out there. But do you need a 10-way freeway switch and a whole bunch of garbage that you're never going to use? Not really. And what it does is it leaves you open to failures. The more complicated the switch is, the more engineering goes into the switch, and the more can go wrong with it. And I am not a person who says, I don't want fuel injection because if it goes wrong, there's more to go wrong on a brand new car. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying that once you have something like that, you are also sort of stuck with it unless you completely rip it all out and do it all over again. A lot of those, like a 10-way freeway switch, for example, is not very serviceable. So when you put it in, because they're foil traces, right? So when you put it in, it's not like you can take it apart and put it back together really more than a couple of times before you start having problems with it. And so getting it right, making sure that it's the circuit you want, making those, it just gets very, very complicated. Unless you have an actual need, I mean a real, genuine need to have all your guitars in one guitar, I would not recommend doing that kind of stuff. Most guitar collectors, and I understand budget's a thing for some people, but most guitar collectors and most guitar players who have a few guitars know that it is more effective to have more than one guitar and purpose build it for a particular sound. It's way easier. And I know it's more expensive, but it's way less headache, especially if you're playing live a lot. I know a lot, well, if I play live, then I'm going to want all the things and I only have to bring one. Nobody actually does that. I mean, some people do, I guess, but it's way easier to switch guitars than it is to, okay, wait a minute. Is it up, down, sideways? Am I holding my mouth right? I can't remember what mode I'm in. Okay, the solo's over and I missed it. Because I used to do that. I used to be that guy. I used to have a Strat with like 20 different tones on it. I used to have a Les Paul with like the 21 tone thing. And I just realized that, you know what, it's just an overkill of stuff that doesn't. Yeah, Scott Harrington is in the comments going, yeah, I build all this crazy stuff. And he does. And I have built him some crazy stuff, and I don't want to do it anymore because absolutely it is the biggest pain in the butt. And then what happens is I own this servicing problem because somebody will, once I build it for somebody, then they're like, well, it doesn't really work right. Or doesn't do what I thought it was supposed to do. And I'm like, okay, here we go. You know what I mean? So it's real way easier to build kind of purpose-built stuff than it is. Would you have any DTT humbucker recommendations for lower tuned drop C or lower metal players? Yes, our Super 8 humbucker is the one for that. That's what I would use for that. It's a low output pickup, but it's got a lot of magnet. It works real well with heavier gauge strings, drop C, that kind of stuff. It retains clarity very well, even though you're at those lower tunings and you're probably going to be using more gain with it. Yeah, dude, the Super 8 is going to be the one that I would totally recommend. for that situation. Does anyone actually like their kill switch? I have a kill switch on my my Machine Gun Kelly guitar, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is here, and I flick it back and forth, but I don't actually use it. I was actually thinking of taking it out and putting a coil tap switch there, or a coil split switch there. Let's see. I have no use for a kill switch. Okay, let's talk about capacitors. Because on my list right here, I have somebody asked me about Russian paper and oil capacitors. Okay, so first of all, let's address the Russian part. Not to put too fine a point on this, but when is the last time you trusted any electronic device made by the Russians before the Cold War ended? Have you seen that stuff? So here's the thing about old capacitors and why they're stupid and why you shouldn't spend a bunch of money on them. Especially paper and oil capacitors, as they get older, they degrade and they drift away from their original value. Well, if they drift away from their original value, then they're not where they were, and they do something in the guitar other than is advertised. And they also drift with heat and cold. Way bad. So, because basically they dry out is what happens. And so without getting super technical, basically the dielectric changes because the space between them changes and the viscosity of the stuff in there changes, etc. So they're not reliable. And yeah, okay, yeah, it's not an airplane. It's not going to crash. Like your guitar's not going to crash because your capacitor is a little off. And if you think it's cool, put it in there, obviously. But you know, anytime anything says mil spec on it, it's old. Okay, so Russian stuff aside, I think it's stupid. Don't waste your money on it. It's cool. It's neat. It looks neat. Like, but here's what you do with Russian capacitors. This is what you do with them. And all that old vintagey electronic parts. This is what you do. Okay? You can still get the full benefit. In fact, you can get more benefit doing this than actually putting them in your guitar. Here's what you do. In your music room, where you have all your guitars, right? And all your buddies come over for band practice or whatever. You have a little, like a plastic dish or like a little dump tray with some picks in it and a couple of those old Russian capacitors in it. That way, when your friends come over, you can be like, oh, dude, do you need a pick? Oh, check out these cool Russian capacitors that I found on eBay. They're from 1960, blah, blah, blah. And you can have a conversation about them. They are still cool, but they're not affecting your guitar negatively in any way. And I think you'll get more like mileage out of them in the little dump tray with the picks. And you'd be like, oh, check it out. Gary Hoey gave me this pick. Oh, and look at this super vintage Russian capacitor. That's probably really the best value that they have, because let me tell you, besides people that tell me that they're a master luthier, people that tell me that they have Russian capacitors are probably the most vocal people, like even more than CrossFit guys. So that's what I would do. That would be the easiest way to do it. That would be the best, most possible. That'd be the best way. Don't capacitors dry out sooner? So have you ever heard of the brand Kill Bill switches? I have not. I work for the Navy. We have to buy mil-spec for anything used for mission equipment. Yeah, so basically, and that what's funny about that is mil-spec's hilarious because sometimes it's super duper duper precision. Sometimes it just means that it's been, and Jim can attest to this, Sometimes it's very, very precision, but sometimes it just means that it's been tested, like a guy checked it. So I had a buddy who used to work for Rockwell International, and he used to buy back in the space shuttle program. This was many years ago. And he told, they always joke about like these $100 bolts, or whatever that you could get at the hardware store for 45 cents. But basically what it meant was it was like that it had to go through all these checks. And what you were paying for was these 10 people who got paid a lot of money to make sure that this bolt was within spec. And it had to be checked so many times that it got so expensive. That's basically what mil-spec is. That doesn't necessarily, in a lot of cases, I'm sure there are some places where it's very, 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 very precision. But most of the time, it's been checked by these many people. Therefore, it is now in mil-spec. I'll give you an example. And we won't talk about this too much, but if you come over here, there are particular rifles, okay, that have mil-spec triggers in them. And it says mil-spec when you purchase it. It is the rattliest piece of crap ever. And you can go and get an aftermarket one, like I've got next to it right here, that costs twice as much, and it's not mil-spec, and it's 30 times better than this rattly piece of crap that I got right here. So mil-spec just means that it passed some tests to get within, whatever. So yeah. Oh, the other thing I get too is people talk to me about mil-spec soldering all the time. And I'm like, are you serious right now? Somebody in the comments yesterday, I'm like, this is funny. People talk about this all the time. Somebody in the comments, here, in fact, this is a mod that you should not do. When you replace components in your guitar, do not wrap the wires around all the little eyelets. Somebody in the comments yesterday on my video was like, you need to be twisting those over before you solder them. No. Here's why. It makes it impossible to service, because then what you have to do is you actually have to remove the solder with a solder braid or a solder wick, and then go in there and untangle it, fight with it, and try to get the wire out if you ever have to replace a pot or something. If you don't wrap the wire around, you're losing nothing. And people will say, well, you're going to get a cold solder. No, if you know how to solder, if you solder properly, it won't. Well, what if it comes loose? I'm going to do a video. I alleged yesterday in that video that I could solder wires onto a switch and pull on them and break the switch before the solder ever breaks. So don't worry about mil-spec soldering. Don't worry about flux. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Just use good rosin core solder, like Kester 6040. That stuff is fantastic. And a good soldering iron. Yeah. What do you think of modding a Tele string ferrule block to a solid aluminum or brass? Will it give more sustain? No, it will not. No. A lot of folks they talk about that whole uniformity of sustain across the thing. But you have to remember that most of the string vibrating energy is gone by the time it gets there, because it's gone past 2 contact angles. Okay. It's gone over the saddles. And actually, if you look at a string through, it actually hits the back of the bridge as it goes into the hole too. So you've actually robbed 99.9% of all vibrating energy in the string itself from it by the time it hits the ferrule on the back of the guitar. There's no vibrating energy left there. So by percentage. So it doesn't matter. Yeah, no. Ask veterans if they get excited about military grade stuff. Oh, I know. Yep. Exactly. Yeah, make a capacitor wall. There you go. I got my vintage guitar and my vintage capacitor. Kessler 6040 at 700 for a few seconds will do anything you need for guitar components. Amen, brother. I actually solder at 800, but, you know, I got to go fast. So there you go. You should really be using mil-spec solder too. Have you ever used mil-spec solder? Like surplus? It's gross. Yeah. It's gross. Let's see. I've heard the ground wire shields so that's why you twist. I guess that I had no idea if that's true. There is some over a distance. So like if you twist up the wires going to the output jack, over this much wire, it won't make a difference. If it was like, 10 feet or something, it would. But in 6 inches, it doesn't make a difference. That's one of the things you got to think about with all this stuff, right? Is the electronics, the physics to the electronics that people talk about in a guitar is all probably true. Okay, so if we talk about for example, so we'll use that. We'll use that for an example. The shielding on a wire, okay? Let's use that, and let's use a Faraday cage. Okay, so we know Faraday cages are real, right? Oh, that's another mod we should talk about. We know that Faraday cages are real because we know that, we've all seen like the Top Gear where they put the car inside the thing and they hit it with lightning, and we know Faraday cages are real. But the science behind them is that the holes in the Faraday, there's a bunch of math that goes into the design of a Faraday cage. And what it is it's basically the holes have to be smaller than I forget what it is, but it's like half the wavelength of the frequency that you're trying to stop. Okay. 60 hertz frequency is so long. It's like 17.5 feet or something, that whether you put a copper foil around something or not, it doesn't really matter. In most situations, because first of all, you're not getting 60 hertz through the guitar, you're actually getting it over the air. And so shielding it is gonna be fine. Shielding your pick guard is gonna be fine. What I would not do, and I've told many, many people this over the years, because I bought your tele pickups and I put them in and they won't work. And the very first question I ask them is, did you shield the control cavity on your guitar? And the answer is always yes. Yes, I did. Rip it all out and your guitar will work. If you shield wires, it doesn't make anything quieter. The noise is electromagnetic interference coming over the air. So through space, like through space, it's hitting your pickups and then it is being amplified. The wires, the pots and the wires like down there is not doing anything. That's not introducing any noise at all whatsoever. At all. Well, yeah, it's an antenna. No, it's not. It's not long enough to be an antenna for the wavelength that we're talking about. The wire on the pickups is, but not the wire in the rest of the guitar. And 2 feet of wire is not enough, okay, to pick up extraneous noise. So all of that EMI stuff comes with coils, basically. So as long as you don't have a coil, you're not going to have noise. The only place you're going to have a coil is with pickups. So it's easier, it's better to shield the back of a pickguard, which is around your pickguard, your pickups, ground it, and then it basically acts as like a satellite dish. It catches that EMI and grounds most of it. And it doesn't make it to the amp. That's why it works. But don't shield your control cavities. You introduce problems. Stuff will touch, in a Strat, it's really bad because if you shield the controls in a Strat, there's just so much going on in there. You look at the Strat and you think, oh, I got all this room. But when you really get down to it and you put all the parts back in the guitar, there's not a lot of room in there. So, you got stuff touching and it just doesn't work. Your pickups are large AM antennas. That is absolutely correct. Yep. What do you think about Grateful Dead innovations like Jerry Garcia's onboard effects loop? You know, that stuff's neat. That's a one-off wacky thing for a wacky guy who makes wacky music. You know, so that's cool. Do I want to do it for somebody? No. Do I want to offer it as a product? No. Is it neat that it exists in a guitar in a museum? Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at. Now, talk about if pedal buffers matter. Absolutely. Remember that you should remember that your guitar signal is constantly dying. Okay. I like to call a guitar circuit a parasitic circuit. You've heard me say this on the channel if you've been around for very long. A parasitic circuit, meaning that anytime you add a component to it, okay, you're actually taking away from the potential for that signal. Part of that circuit, and a lot of people don't think about this. They think about the guitar circuit ending at the output jack, but it does not. On a passive guitar, not an active one, but on a passive guitar, it ends at the first buffer. So it includes the length of the guitar cable all the way until the first amplifier. And in a buffered case, it would be like the buffer in your TU3 Boss tuner. That's why I think it's very important to have a buffered pedal early in your signal chain on your pedal board, because you're losing signal, you're building capacitance, and you're losing frequencies all the way until that first pedal. That's why the quality of the cable is very important. People overlook that because that's part of the guitar. Your guitar cable is part of the guitar. It's not part of the amp, at least before the first buffer. So that's why DylanTalksTone.com, you can go and buy a really good Runway audio cable, signature model with our colors on it and everything, because I really believe in that. It's not I believe it, it's technically true that the better your guitar cable is, the better your sound's going to be, well, up to a point. It's more accurate to say the worse your guitar cable is, the worse your sound's going to be. So just know that your guitar is part of your guitar cable is part of your guitar. So a buffered input is super, super important. Yeah. Let's see. Shield the pickguard. Plastics are generally transparent to RF, but what we're doing, Russell, it's not about the plastics. What it's about is creating more or less like a satellite dish to catch the electromagnetic interference as it comes through the air and capturing it on the foil on the back of the pickguard. So not the pickguard itself. We're not worried about the pickguard itself, but the foil on the back of the pickguard, and then grounding it so that it bleeds to ground before your pickups amplify the sound. Because hum in a guitar is just amplified electromagnetic interference. So your pickups pick up that electromagnetic interference, and then they amplify it, and you hear it as hum. Well, if you can bleed that off the ground before your pickups amplify it, then you have less of it. That's why you'll never totally get rid of it, because you still have some that gets there, but not all of it. Yeah. Couldn't you just wrap yourself in copper slug repellent tape? You could. And actually, that's what I use. There's a link on down below where you can go to our Amazon store, and that's what I buy. Copper slug tape is awesome because the stuff that I use, the glue conducts electricity. And because that's very important. Otherwise, you have to solder all the seams, and it's dumb. So, yeah. Yep. Let's see. Humbuckers are just coils set differently to common. Humbuckers are two single coils that are wound in series where the signal travels in opposite directions through them in order to cancel hum. That's what they do. And so if you have they're reverse wound, reverse polarity from each other because they're on opposite sides of the same magnet. And then the signal, the coils are not actually wound backwards from each other, but the signal flows through them backwards. So what I mean by that is the signal will come in one coil and out, and then in the out of the other one, and then, well, it goes in and then out and then out and then in, basically. So clockwise and then counterclockwise. Let's see, would aluminum, an aluminum suit like Daft Punk. Yeah, that's funny. Shielding is a funny thing because people really get really bonkers about it, and they really want to argue about it. And the science is actually really simple. If you're watching television at all, you're using electromagnetic waves. So the way a satellite dish works, in fact, we did a video on this, and I actually went to a TV station and explained it to you. But basically, the way a satellite dish works is it's a big dish that captures electromagnetic waves. And then that little thing, that's got the little stick up here, it's called an LNB or an LNA. And what that stands for is low noise amplifier. And basically what's in that thing that sticks out in the middle of a satellite dish is a guitar pickup. It's just a coil. That's all it is. And it's like a coil and then a distortion pedal. Literally, that's basically what it is. So it's a low noise amplifier. So it takes the very low electromagnetic noise that's coming in from space. The dish directs it up to this guitar pickup with a distortion pedal on it. So it's an amplifier, and it's a coil that picks up that, and then it amplifies it and sends it down to be made into TV sound, TV pictures, because it's done at frequencies that can happen. So that's what a satellite dish does. So what you're doing with a guitar pick guard is you're making it into a satellite dish, but instead of allowing it to get to the pickup in the middle, you're grounding it so that it doesn't get to the pickup in the middle. Basically, you're just kind of trying to do the opposite. Yep, kind of fun. Any point in copper shielding a jazz bass cavity? Now, on a bass, those can be kind of funky. A lot of jazz basses will actually ground the poles. So, and I don't know why you don't do this on a Strat. I should experiment with it. We do it with the Tele stuff. But on a bass, you always want to have the start wire be the negative, and you want to take a foil piece of tape and connect the bottom poles, bottom of the magnets, and ground them. That'll keep it as quiet as possible. Yep. Yeah. Let me see if I got anything else. Oh, okay. Locking tuners. Let's talk about locking tuners for a second. Locking tuners are really cool because they're really convenient and they make string changes super fast, but they do not, in most situations, they do not add tuning stability. If you string a guitar properly with 3 or 4 wraps, no stupid knot, and you actually string the guitar properly, it will be no less stable tuning-wise than a locking tuner. A locking tuner, all it really does is just make string changes fast because you can, one-hand stuff and everything. They're awesome. They're great. Everybody should have them. I love them. I think they're great. I think they should be on everything. kind of. Like, I want my guitar to look right, so I don't want them on my Les Paul. But, you know, I think they look cool on some stuff and not on others. But they don't really fix tuning stability problems. People think that because they're locking, but they don't lock anything. Because really what happens, all they do is lock the string. But the string still expands and contracts with tremolo usage, with string bending. It's still subject to binding at the nut. It's still subject to friction at the bridge. It's still subject to all the exact same things that a guitar without locking tuners on it has. So you're not introducing any more tuning stability. All you're doing is you're making it easier to change. Now, people will say, well, you don't have to wrap it around. So therefore, yes, but if you do it properly, 3 or 4 winds, and you do it properly on a regular guitar string, the delta between a properly strung guitar and a locking tuner will be so narrow that it won't matter. And then the last thing on my list was the Vibramate spoiler. So anything to do with the Bigsby, the dumb bar that you put the strings through, the Vibramate spoiler, any of that stuff. This is another one where if you have a properly set up guitar, it will be fine. It will work awesome. It will work awesome. The only Bigsby mod that I do or have done or am very open to doing would be spring length. So sometimes, you know, there's a 3/4 inch spring, there's a 1 inch spring, there's an 1 1/4 spring. So depending on the application and how you want to use the Bigsby, you know, within its design parameters, changing the spring is nice. Sometimes you can do that and you can get some benefit from it because most of that has to do with the design of the guitar though, because depending on the height of it from the body of the guitar to the top of the bridge and the angles and all that stuff, that kind of dictates all of that. And so, and I'll bend the handle a little bit sometimes. You know, I'll bend the bar sometimes. We're going to do a video because I just got my Texas Toast Icon with a Bigsby on it, and I want to do some work to it. And what Chris told me, he's like, FYI, I just slapped that Bigsby on there and didn't really do anything to it because I knew you would want to put your own sauce on it. And I'm like, thank you, because I appreciate that because I do. The handles always come a little loose from the factory. They got a little nut in there that you can adjust with a little spring to get it to be a little firmer. There's some stuff you can do with tension. Obviously, alignment is really important. So there's a bunch of stuff we're going to do in a video. But all that stuff, other stuff, it's just because people don't like it. And get it if you want it. If you're one of those people who's like, I hate having a Bigsby and I have to have that thing on there, otherwise I don't like having a Bigsby at all. I get it. But I just think they're Band-Aids to problems that don't actually exist. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, you know, stuff's cool. Cool stuff's cool. Just put it all on your guitar. We should do a guitar build like that where we just put all of the stuff on there. Robo tuners and a Floyd. Can you put a Floyd and an Evertune on a guitar at the same time? You know, just all of the things. Put all of it on there. Like all of it at the same time. You could at least do it in Photoshop, I guess. And just have all the mods, you know? Sounds fun to me. I don't like roller bridges either. I'll never use one. I can't stand them things. They put too much other noise in the guitar that I don't like. What happens is it's very important. You hear me bang on about this, but it's very important to keep as much energy between the saddle and the nut as possible. And the bottom line is roller bridges allow it to escape. And especially with the Bigsby, because you have so much length behind the saddle, you get a lot of noise from that, and I don't like that. So I don't do that. So there you go. Roller string trees are cool. I mean, if you have to have string trees, they're cool. You know, you need them. Well, you guys, this has been fun. Thanks for hanging out. This has been a fun conversation to have. I appreciate everybody hanging out with me, talking about guitar mods. It's the best, right? Tomorrow, we're going to have a video that's basically going to be 5 things that you can do to your guitar for free that will make your tone better. And I think you're going to dig that video. It's pretty cool. It's going to come out tomorrow afternoon. And other than that, we will see you then. Thanks for all the super chats. Thanks for all the views. Thanks for everything. Please do me a favor. We have 64% of you are not subscribed. Please hit the subscribe button. We're so close to 100,000. We're going to do something fun when we get to 100,000. I don't have it totally nailed down yet, but I do know we're doing some cool stuff. And I'd like you all to be a part of it. So hit the subscribe button and be a part of it. It's going to happen here in the next week or two. And I think it's going to be pretty sweet. Although you control that. So the sooner you hit subscribe, the sooner we are going to do it. We'll see you all tomorrow.